All right, so here's what I've done. I have a few answers. They're all from the same email address, never mind that, but they're from different people. Rachel answered my form, Brian answered my form, Jacob answered my form. And what I want to do now is I want to be able to send these students these emails. I'd like to give each one a word. I'd like to give each one a definition to their word and also some examples that they can use in class. So I know I'm probably going to get about 30 more responses here. So what I'm going to do, just to make it quick, is I'm going to select deep surface and transfer and my my definitions and my examples. And I'm just going to drag this down so that I already have like a handful of columns or rows filled out and ready to go. Right now, only 3 people have responded, and that is plenty. What I did is I grabbed my responses. Here's my form. Here's my responses. I clicked on the little sheets icon here, and it pulled up these 2 answers that students gave me, their email address and their name. And then I added in a word, a definition, and examples. I put it here. If I want to sort these later, which is something I do a lot when I'm in the moment in class, I like to select my word column and sort. That way it's really easy for me to say, oh, hey, Brian, can you give me a surface definition? And if Brian can't answer or his audio is off or he needs help, I can go to the next student who hasn't answered anything yet, and I can ask them, okay, help Brian out. What's the definition? What are some examples? I'm going to undo that for now just to keep this nice and clean. But sorting your words and definitions can be a time saver when you're in class with students. So now I'm going to go to add-ons and select FormMule. I'm going to launch. And it takes a moment. That's not a big deal. We're going to do the most simple version of FormMule that we can because the idea here is just to work quickly and efficiently. There's only one sheet I can select. I only have one tab here. It's called Form Responses 1. That's pretty simple. Now I'm going to hit the blue button. I'm not going to worry about form triggers. I'm also going to keep this just as it is. I'm going to send for all rows. I only want to use one template. My next step here is to save by hitting the blue button. Once it saves, I go to the next blue button and say next, edit templates, because again, I'm keeping this as simple and straightforward as can be. All right, here we go. Now you'll see that I have a 2-line. This is how I set up an email. To, CC, BCC, reply to, subject. This all looks pretty familiar. And you'll notice that here, my merge tags are the same column titles that I have put into my spreadsheet. The timestamp, an email address, and first name, these came directly from the results of my Google form. The word, definitions, examples, I put those in myself. Current date and live form URL, don't sweat those. I didn't put them in. They're not a big deal. So right now, I want all of my emails to go to whatever they said their email address was. In this case, because I'm doing a demonstration, I'm going to select this button, email address, and that means that FormMule is going to pull any email address that students have given me when I ask them, hey, what's your email? Usually, I just pull the email address automatically, but when I'm working with adult learners, sometimes we have one email address that we're using to complete the form, but there's another one that's easier to check on your phones. So asking students to input their email address is not necessary, but when I'm working with people from outside my own school district, it's helpful to just say, hey, which email are you going to check? Otherwise, you can use Google Forms to just collect email addresses. All right, I'm not going to worry about CC or BCC. You can put no reply here. I'll go ahead and put my email address. Cool. Subject. So this is where, after trial and error, I've learned how to get it pretty concise. This is what I like to make my subject. Your word today is, and here I assign the students a word. I did that by selecting the gray word button here on the right. And you'll notice, yeah, that looks pretty good. When I see these 2 little triangles on the left and on the right of the word word, those are showing me that it's a merge tag. That's what we want. Leave it as is. All right, and now I want to address this to a student. So I say, dear And remember, I asked them to tell me what their first name was. So I use this button, your first name. I don't want it to say, "Dear, your first name, Jonathan." So I'm going to delete these little words that FormMule input for me. I don't need them. Dear, your first name, comma. So this will say, "Dear Jonathan, your word today is," this looks just like the subject, not a big deal. And again, FormMule tries to give me my word twice. I don't need that. Your word today is word. Here is a definition. Again, I'm going to delete the word word, don't need it. And I found after trial and error, it kind of helps if I do things line by line rather than making this all one large line. Do it in the way that works best for you and your students. Now I'm going to select whatever I've put in the definition column. And I'm also going to give them some examples. Here are some examples of verbs associated with the word. Colon. And here I'm going to put examples. And I usually end it with a very nice little salutation. Thanks for being here today. I appreciate you. And now I'm going to hit save and send all because I know it won't really save and send all yet. This will allow me to preview an example of what I've put together. So here's an example. This will go to learning@kellysmiller.com because when I filled out my own form, I told my form that my name was Rachel and that this was my email address. And if I'm asking my students in class to look for an email from, they usually look for the reply to. So that's an okay email address to fill out there. Your word today is deep. Dear Rachel, your word today is deep. Here's a definition of deep, relating things to each other. Here are some examples of verbs associated with the word deep. Compare, contrast, relate, analyze. Looks pretty good, except that I don't like that I have 2 colons here and also the word examples. So I can go back to edit templates. Let's look again. I'm going to hit save and preview this time. Oh, that looks correct. Dear Rachel, your word is deep. Here's a definition of the word deep, relating things to each other. Here are some examples of verbs associated with deep. Compare, contrast, relate, analyze. Thanks for being here. I appreciate you. That looks nice. Let's go to the next row and see what that looks like. Your word is surface. Thanks for being here. Nice. Let's look at one more. Your word is transfer. Applying your understanding. Here's some examples. Awesome. This is looking pretty good. Right now I can hit save and send all if I'm ready to do that. And since I've only added 3 respondents to my form, it's actually only going to send 3 emails and tell me that the other 24 were errors. I'm not going to panic. I know that those other 24 empty boxes that should have email addresses will get filled out whenever I'm working with students or adult learners. So I'm going to hit send now. And this is where it gets really fun. The most emails I've ever sent in a day from FormMule is 1,500. That takes a few minutes for FormMule to generate and send out. When you're just sending a few, it doesn't take very long. Here we go. I'm not worried about the fact that it says I have errors because I know this was just a demonstration and I have lots of empty email address boxes on my form. All right, now the magic has been done. When I scroll over to the right, FormMule created a new column for me. I'm not going to mess with it. I just leave it here, and it tells me what date and time emails were sent to learning@kellysmiller.com. And let's see what it looks like. And voila. When students receive emails, they'll look like this. So let's see, in this case, I was telling the internet that my name was Jacob. Here I have an email in my inbox. It says, Dear Jacob, your word is transfer. Here's the definition of transfer. Applying your understanding to a new context. Here's some examples of the verbs associated with transfer: evaluate, create, and apply. Thanks for being here. I appreciate you. And now Jacob is ready to go. He has a completely psychologically safe space to read the answer before he says it aloud to the class. All right, FormMule. Thanks, everybody.